I know that Frank has capably outlined many of the risks involved in Zohran Mamdani being mayor of New York. And the only thing I can say about that is that it's worse than he said. Uh, not that Frank is not aware of all this, but that it would take hours and probably longer to detail all the ways in which this man is dangerous. I'm going to give you a couple that I think may come as a surprise to you. There is imagine a police chief of an American city who destroyed evidence by wiping his city-owned phone. He drove his city vehicle while intoxicated, misused his police lights to run red lights, and at one point handed a loaded gun to a civilian volunteer, ordering the volunteer to point the gun at somebody's head. This police chief was subsequently fired. He was Jamil Al-Taheri, the police chief of Hamtramck, Michigan, which was one of the first American cities to have a Muslim mayor, a majority Muslim city council, and this Muslim police chief. But even the Muslim officials there fired him after his brazen misconduct, as I've outlined. But Zohran Mamdani has offered him a job in his administration. This is in line with the cronyism that we have always seen in far left regimes as well as in Islamic regimes, where competence takes a backseat to identity. We know that the left plays identity politics, fetishizes identity politics to the extent that if someone is brown, if someone is a migrant, if someone is non-white, they'll get preference and be celebrated over a similarly competent candidate or a more competent candidate who doesn't check the requisite identity boxes. And we know that in Islamic regimes, people who are Muslim are favored over non-Muslims, even if the non-Muslim is more competent, because Islamic law teaches that non-Muslims shouldn't have authority over Muslims, but should be in a subservient position. And so consequently, many jobs that they could have filled would go to a Muslim instead. So we don't know exactly what Jamil Al-Taheri is going to be doing in the New York City mayoral administration. Mamdani has not commented on the fact, but Jamil Al-Taheri himself has announced that he has been offered a position. And I think that that is indicative of the tendencies that we're going to see in the new regime for the next few years. Another news item that you may not have noted comes out of Tehran, where a professor at Tehran University named Fouad Izzadi recently was speaking about Mamdani's victory in the mayoral campaign. And he said the things you might expect, that this is a glorious repudiation of Zionism in the most Zionist city in America, New York, which has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel itself. But he also said, and I thought this was much more interesting, that the 1979 embassy takeover in Tehran and the hostage crisis that followed, where Iranians kept held Americans hostage for 444 days until Ronald Reagan became president and they were freed on Inauguration Day, that was a message to what he termed, the arrogant, racist, and oppressive power of the United States. And Fouad Izzadi went on to say that the arrogant, racist, oppressive power that had been given this message in 1979 had now received it again in New York City in this election. And so, in other words, America's enemies who openly hate America see Zohran Mamdani's election as a victory over America itself. They're not pulling any punches about it. In the American press, you have it being sold as a triumph of diversity or an exciting new young wing of the Democrat Party or the triumph of the democratic socialists and so on. This is not what they're saying in Iran. In Iran, they're saying that America has been struck a blow right at its heart. And that's what the victory of Zohran Mamdani represents. Now, Mamdani, of course, is not only just, as Frank was saying, not only just a 12er Shiite, but also a Marxist. And it's important to note that Marxism wants to bring chaos to non-Marxist polities. This is not an accident. In other words, people are warning that Zohran Mamdani, as mayor of New York, may implement, if he implements the policies that he's been promising to implement, will bring great trouble to New York. The city could go bankrupt. There could be a mass flight of people who have any amount of income such that the tax base is destroyed, and so on and so on. But it must be understood in light of Zohran Mamdani's stated ideologies that a chaos that would result from his policies is, as they say, not a bug, but a feature, something that he actively wants. Zohran Mamdani, as a Marxist and as a 12er Shiite, wants to destabilize New York. Destabilizing New York would not be the accidental result of the things that he is advocating. It would be the desired result of the things that he is advocating. Now, you may find that absolutely unbelievable and think, no, it's inconceivable. We might have a different view of what constitutes the good for New York and for America in general, but we can't say that he wants to destroy the city and that's why he's become mayor. Well, actually, that's exactly what I'm suggesting, that he does want rising crime. He wants the city to become unlivable. He wants mass flight of the moneyed interests. He wants all of this. There are several reasons why. One is that he does hate America. Death to America, the Ayatollah Khamenei has said, is not just a slogan, but the policy of the Iranian regime. It is the goal of the Iranian regime, according to the supreme leader himself. And so from the Muslim standpoint, you have a guy who holds to the same ideology. Now, does Zohran Mamdani hold to the ideology of 12er Shiism, the same ideology that rules the Islamic Republic of Iran, but he rejects the whole death of America business? Conceivably. However, it is much more likely that he wants to bring it about. And he knows that he can bring it about by destroying New York. From the Marxist standpoint, the more crime there is, the more dangerous New York is, the more there will be justification for authoritarian response, for measures that might be arguably unconstitutional. But then, of course, somebody has to take the initiative and declare them unconstitutional. Somebody has to take him to court. And that may happen in New York. But I think that New York is already so far to the left that he's going to be able to do a great deal to destroy the city without any significant pushback. This is something that stems from both of his guiding ideologies, from his 12er Shiism and his Marxism. And then he's got a scapegoat also that he can blame, because the idea is not to not destroy New York. The idea is to destroy New York, but have a scapegoat, and then exploit the blaming of the scapegoat to further enhance one's own political power. And so he can bankrupt the city, lead it to ruin, and then go to the federal government and say, Mr. Trump, we need you to bail the city out. And Trump will likely say no. Whereupon the blame for the destruction of the city will be on Trump and not on Mamdani. And you might think, no, people will know that it was Mamdani who did it. Well, I hope you're right about that. But remember in the 1970s, or if you weren't born yet, this is what happened. The leftists were running New York City then as now, and they bankrupted the city, as Mamdani will likely do. And the New York City administrators went to President Gerald Ford and asked him for handouts to bail the city out to help it meet its budget so it wouldn't go bankrupt. And Ford refused and urged fiscal responsibility, a little bit of belt tightening on the city officials. And the New York Daily News published one of the most famous headlines in journalistic history: Ford to city, drop dead. Many people ascribed Ford's defeat the following year. This all was in 1975. And Ford lost the presidential election to Jimmy Carter the next year. Many people ascribed the defeat of Gerald Ford to his refusal to bail out New York. The fault was entirely his in the media. People were not saying it was the fault of Abraham Beame, the mayor of New York, or his predecessor, John V. Lindsay, or others who had actually run the city into the ground. Now, of course, we know that the establishment media hates Trump and consequently is likely, well, is certain to blame him in the same way. Now, they don't have the hegemony over the public discourse that they had in 1975. And so there will be many dissenting voices, but it will be widespread that Trump has ruined New York. Trump has destroyed New York. And Zohran Mamdani will play the victim. We've already seen him play the victim quite skillfully as a Muslim. It's interesting to note, as a matter of fact, that he ran almost his entire campaign as a socialist. He ran on free stuff, which is how socialists get into power. And the socialists, of course, were entirely behind the whole endeavor of positioning him as being somebody who was simply in the ideological camp of Barack Obama and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and the others in the Democrat Party who are socialists now. Of course, Obama, unlike the others, is not an open socialist, but he was representing the young, energized vanguard and so on and so on. And he actually spoke very little about being a Muslim and his Muslim identity. But toward the end of the campaign, he began to speak much more frequently about being a Muslim, and he has ever since he was elected as well. But it's important to note that the constant theme of his Islam when he brought it up during the campaign was all about how he was a victim. It was all about how New York was beset with Islamophobia, and of course his famous fictional aunt could not go outside after 9/11 wearing her hijab because she would be harassed in New York City, which was, of course, a lot of nonsense, even aside from the fact that his aunt was fictional. It just never was that kind of harassment in New York City or anywhere else in the United States after 9/11 or at any other time. And so the whole scenario was false. But the point is that he was able to manipulate his victimhood status quite well. And the left, of course, idolizes victimhood and presents itself as the champion of all the victims, the savior of the oppressed. And so when he goes up against Trump, he will doubtless be striking the same kind of victimhood poses, accusing Trump of Islamophobia. Remember also that he accused Andrew Cuomo on 2 occasions of Islamophobia. Now, in the first place, of course, Islamophobia is an entirely spurious, ridiculous concept that was coined. The word was coined in order to intimidate people into thinking it was wrong to oppose jihad violence and Sharia oppression. But if anybody was going to be never going to be Islamophobic, it was somebody like Andrew Cuomo, a standard issue establishment leftist politician, part of the corrupt leftist establishment for decades. And so he knows that the Muslims are a protected class, are one of the favored victim groups. He's not going to be Islamophobic. But Mamdani, during his campaign, in the first time accused him of Islamophobia when Cuomo's camp published a flyer. Probably Cuomo never saw it at all. It was just another mailer like you get during campaigns all the time. And like many mailers, this one had a negative, sinister looking picture of the opponent on it. Now, I don't save campaign mailings, but if I had, I could show you 20 pictures of candidates looking bad on their opponent's mailings. It's not anything unusual, but the way that Mamdani's photo was manipulated, it was the contrast was brought out, and he looked sinister and so on. And he claimed that the Cuomo camp had thickened his beard. It was just the shadow that came out when they increased the contrast and made him look darker so that he would be scarier for New York voters. It was a lot of nonsense, but it enabled him to claim Islamophobia. And later, when a radio host on WABC was interviewing Cuomo and said Mamdani would probably cheer 9/11, and Cuomo said, yeah, not only that, but so and so and so. He didn't really agree with the guy, but this became this terrible Islamophobic statement. And so Mamdani, in other words, is a skillful politician and highly manipulative. He knows how to play the game so that the establishment media will portray him in the way he wants to be portrayed, as the innocent victim of these powerful forces, Cuomo, and now it will be Trump. And so that's really all that I have to tell you today. It's two fundamental points. One is that the enemies of America are celebrating this victory, and not without reason. Maybe three fundamental points, excuse me. And that he, in his appointment of Jamil al-Tahiri, he is indicating that he's going to do just exactly what we would expect him to do as a 12er Shiite and as an Islamist and as a Marxist as well. And that doesn't bode well. And that he will nonetheless be able to deflect, at least in the establishment media, deflect attention away from his cronyism, his corruption, his active efforts to destroy the city by blaming primarily Trump, but also others as well as needed. And so it's going to be a rough road ahead, but never lose hope and keep working, and we'll get through this. Thank you.